Hello, everyone. I'm Harpreet Singh, welcoming you to the Future Work Pioneers podcast. Today, we are speaking with Tanuj Kapilashrami, the CHRO at Standard Chartered. Tanuj leads the employee experience of 85,000 employees globally with Standard Chartered's presence in 60 markets. Before joining Standard Chartered, Tanuj worked with HSBC for 17 years. She's currently a board member of the UK Financial Services Skills Commission and Asia House, which is a London based center of expertise on trade, investment, and public policy with a mission to drive engagement between Asia and Europe. Tanuj, welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot, Harpreet.
So let's begin with your background. HR function requires a multidisciplinary background and appreciation of diversity. And you've been fortunate to have spent time across continents and geographies. How has this background shaped you as a senior HR leader? Perhaps you can talk about that.
Thanks, Harpreet. And first, it's great to be on this podcast. So thank you so much for inviting me. I, as you rightly said, have been in HR profession for many years. Prior to that, my academic background is in economics, math, statistics. So my background's sort of always been in data, business. I spent the first 10 years working in Asia, so Hong Kong, Singapore, India, worked in London, but then went to the Middle East for a few years. So worked across Middle East and Africa, came back to London a couple of years ago now, 7 years ago, and my current role based out of London. How does that sort of help? I think, the role I do currently, as you say, across 60 markets. We are an emerging markets bank. And I think a multidisciplinary experience across various parts of HR, but also an exposure to various markets gives you the cultural understanding of our footprint, which is actually quite important in landing some big programs and initiatives. I know we are going to talk about future of work today. It's hugely important because a lot of the thinking is very Western centric, has traditionally been very Western centric. We are trying to take some of the best of that thinking research. We're trying to land it in markets. We are incredibly fast growing, that are sort of accelerating the pace of change, parts of Africa, Asia, parts of Middle East, and having a cultural understanding of those markets, I think becomes hugely beneficial. I'm also a firm believer that the best solutions come from people who are closest to the problems. And I think one of the things I consciously do, having worked in some of the markets, met our clients, met our customers in those markets, is even in my current role, keep going back to our frontline colleagues across these markets and testing some of the ideas with them, because that's hugely important. As you rightly said, a large part of my professional experiences within financial services, but I sit on the board of a big retail business in UK, Sainsbury, which is a big grocery chain. And I found that experience hugely valuable as well, because it's a different sector, but some of the challenges around people, culture are similar, and bringing in those learnings into my day job is a huge opportunity for me as well.
It's very interesting that you mentioned that exporting a Western model to an Eastern market doesn't always work. Can you give us some sense of what that means? How, perhaps an example where a good idea that seemed like a good idea didn't work in a non-Western context?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I'm getting into dangerous territory with an academic like you on this one, Harpreet. But I think some of the traditional models around leadership, especially when it comes to a female leadership, what do women need to do to get into leadership positions, have traditionally been based a lot around boardrooms in the West. So this idea of leaders need to, the idea of leadership presence, the sort of gravitas or contribution is very, very driven by boardrooms in the West. And as we are taking some of that into markets in Asia and Africa, it's not that principle and thinking is wrong, but there is an active contextualization to those markets and those cultures that we need to do. I think when you come to diversity and inclusion, it becomes quite interesting as well, because the whole idea of inclusion or diversity in these markets where cultural norms are very different has been quite interesting. So, it's not that the research is wrong. It's just that we are looking at a cultural context where societal norms are very different. People get into certain roles that are imposed by the society, and we are trying to we're trying to talk about a much more inclusive culture, and how do we balance the two is an interesting experience.
Let's talk about future of work. I would be interested to understand from your perspective what it looks like specifically for financial services, right? Because the definition varies from industry to industry. But are there any salient things that one needs to worry about when we think about future of work in your industry?
Yeah, one thing is that the bank, Standard Chartered, is largely an emerging markets bank. So, future of work, which, flexible working is a huge part of it, even though the whole concept is much broader. It's about agility in its broadest of sense. But many of the markets, especially in financial services, had never experienced any level of flexible working, either because of regulatory constraints. We are a highly regulated industry. Many of our jobs are, there are very clear regulatory standards on how those roles need to be done. But also culturally, the idea that, in UK, where I work, in London, quite a few of our colleagues have traditionally worked 1 or 2 days from home, was not something that had ever happened across many of our markets. Pandemic struck, and literally overnight, in a matter of days, we had 80 to 85% of our global workforce working from home. So it was overnight, the sort of rules of the game changed for us significantly. And in many parts of our footprint, apart from very few branches or service centers, which we had to keep open, or were able to keep open, rest of the work was being done remotely, which was both a cultural challenge. It was an infrastructure challenge, because to even equip our colleagues with the infrastructure, especially in operations role, traditional banking operations, which was physically done in premises, was a big change. And as we are coming out of the lockdown in many of our markets, and various stages of coming out of the crisis, we are taking the learnings of last year and embedding that into a sustainable, flexible working approach. And in that case, for us, among the stakeholders are not just our colleagues, our leaders, our clients, but it's also the regulators, which is a key stakeholder for us across many of these markets. So I think that, for me, would be perhaps a key area of difference in our sector.
Mm-hmm. You've talked about redesigning employee experience and how it's a shared responsibility, and across functions, across management roles. Can you share your journey in implementing some of the changes which you've led when it comes to redefining employee experience at Standard Chartered?
Yeah, look, I will stick to the future of work theme. One of the things I did very early on in my stint is got much before COVID, got an employee experience council, which is jointly chaired by our technology officer and me. And the idea was that while HR is not the only part of the bank that is responsible for owning the employee experience. So employee experience is not just how you apply for leave on the HR system and how it gets approved. It's much broader than that. Somebody needs to play the role in curating that employee experience. And in our case, it was me, with support of our chief technology officer, that came together in what we called an employee experience forum, where we got everyone in the bank. So, various aspects of that experience, from property, technology, product design for our customers, risk management aspects. So, when you look at sort of cyber risk management control, all of the senior leaders together to get this very clear lens around, as we are designing controls, risk frameworks, products for our customers, are we keeping a very strong employee experience lens or not? And it comes from my very strong belief, which I've always had, that actually in HR, we are product managers, and our product is employment. And like any good product manager, you would get experience into your design thinking with whatever you do. So, we had an employee experience forum, which proved to be one of the most valuable assets we had as the crisis struck, because very early in our employee experience forum, and the experience forum, it's a great group of people, very senior leaders, and we talk about irritants, we look at design, but very early on, under the banner of our employee experience forum, we took the decision that we are going to leverage the best coming out of the crisis to fundamentally rewire how work gets done in Standard Chartered going forward. And we launched this very ambitious program, which we called Future of Work Now. It's not the future anymore. The future of work has arrived. Mm-hmm. And that piece of work, which was jointly led by HR, property, and technology, has been working, and we've had some really good successes. So about how do you implement flexible working at scale? What is our point of view around hybrid working? What do our employees really want? Implement flexible working at scale, but also a lot of the work around redesigning how work gets done. So, the flexibility is not just about home working. It's about taking an approach to looking at design of work across all of our job families and forming a view at the job level. So it's been incredible. We launched the formal infrastructure around flexibility at scale. And this is not just home, it's location, time, flexibility in our top 8 markets early this year. And in those top 8 markets, we employ 45% of our workforce. So it's a substantial chunk of our workforce. And from 1st of April, we are going to go live with formal arrangements for 84% of our colleagues who are going to get into formal flexible working arrangements, which is location, time, as compared to 10%, under 10%, before the formal project was launched. So in some ways, it's fundamentally sort of redesigning. So it's been flexibility, but it's also been about redesigning property. How do our properties look like? We have done an arrangement with near office, near home provider. So for colleagues to get together in these business lounges, which provides an optionality for them to consider how work gets done. So it's been really interesting to think about future of work, not just from terms and condition contract type, but think of it holistically based on employee experience.
You very interestingly, you mentioned that you also need to kind of think about not just the space, but also you need to think about the actual job function, redesigning that. Can you give us an example of perhaps pick one that had to be redesigned and how you went about doing it?
Yeah. So like I said, in this entire piece of work, we took a very data-led approach. So, we were very conscious from the beginning that we are not going to design something based on our preference. And that, for me, if there's one insight that I can share, sometimes as senior leaders, a lot of our thinking gets driven by our preference or what we have heard last from people we've spoken to. And we took a very, very data-led approach to this work. So right from the beginning, we dialed up employee listening. And during the course of last year, we went to our colleagues 3 times, 2 times via anonymous survey, and the 3rd time with a formal expression of interest process, where we asked them to show us their preference. Tell us, how do you want to do work going forward, which is, do you want flexibility? How much of flexibility do you want? Is it just location, time? Is it location in terms of home and office, or is it another country? So we got huge amount of data, and at every point in time, the moment we designed something, we went back and validated that thinking with 86,000 colleagues. And that was the critical part of the design. Was we are not designing on the basis of our preference. We are designing on the basis of what our colleagues are telling us and bringing that insight into work. While that piece of work was bottom up, we complemented that work with a job family analysis. So all of our job families, all 144 of them, we made an assessment of what can be done with greater level of flexibility and what are the tweaks that are needed to deliver that on flexibility. Now, some jobs in a bank cannot be done flexibility. A teller in a branch, for example, or a trader, right? And this is both regulatory, the nature of the job. But interestingly, we realized that over 80% of our jobs can be done with much greater flexibility than they were being done previously. And so for us, that piece of work was really, really important because you got to combine employee preference with a formal assessment done at the job level, because that's where you assess impact to client, management of risk. And in making an assessment of level of flexibility in the job, we actually spoke a lot to use the principle to really accelerate a move towards agile working in the organization. So what we said was, this is also a great opportunity for us to determine not just jobs that can be done with a level of flexibility, but actually reinvent and reintroduce in a big way new ways of working across the company. So the idea of agile squads coming together, people come together for a purpose. The purpose are retrospectives. The purpose is, as opposed to in the past where people came together to actually, people came into offices to just get their BAU work done. So the idea was going back and challenging ourselves on level of flexibility in the jobs, but then also introducing new ways of working in the company in a big way, so that when we launched hybrid, so we came out with a very clear intent of going hybrid, the idea of colleagues coming together was much more purposeful and intentional, in service of solving biggest problems facing the bank, innovation, collaboration, as opposed to pushing paper or doing sort of traditional forms of work. So that's the sort of design approach that we took in the work.
This episode is brought to you by Experfy. Incubated in Harvard Innovation Lab, Experfy provides custom future of work solutions, such as private talent clouds and skill taxonomies. Experfy differentiates itself by using subject matter experts to pre-vet and pipeline candidates for AI and high-end technology skills. However, Experfy Talent Cloud Platform is skill agnostic and can be licensed to build custom talent clouds for any and all skills. In a different use case, enterprises interested in employee intermobility can license the Experfy platform to create an internal gigs marketplace where interested employees can be algorithmically matched to projects, gamifying their learning experience. Visit www.experfy.com for more information.
The role of the CHRO has been elevated because of the pandemic. Like many of your colleagues in other firms, there's a distinct need to partner with the senior leadership. So tell us about how this has evolved internally at Standard Chartered. How are you working with your leadership team, throughout the pandemic, and how that's going to continue?
I always say this to my team. My generation also lived through the financial crisis, the big financial crisis. And I keep saying to my team, the financial crisis belonged to the CFOs in banks. This is a humanitarian crisis, and this belongs to the HR function and CHROs in the bank. And, in a year where just dealing with the crisis would have been enough, right? Because bear in mind, at its peak, we were talking about health concerns, security, safety concerns across 60 markets. That sort of the initial concerns around staff safety, well-being moved to the second order concerns, burnout, ensuring that, we were able to lead inclusively. It then led to how do we land basic HR processes? How do you performance manage? How do you reward? So while management of the crisis would have been enough, I'm incredibly proud of how not just my HR function, but I think many HR functions used the opportunity last year to accelerate the trends that we had been talking about for a very, very long time. So I actually believe that the silver lining, if there is any, in this crisis is that it has helped us fundamentally challenge conventional norms around leadership, around work, worker, and workplaces. And, there are so many great examples of companies that have done it. And, I am incredibly proud of how my team and my function sort of stood up, rose to the challenge of becoming real thought leaders. So, not passive followers of the agenda, but sort of really leading on what does this mean for our colleagues and for our leaders, and actually being agile and flexible in changing the approach. A lot of work traditionally was done.
On the topic of upskilling and reskilling, Standard Chartered already has an existing initiative of providing learning content that's accessible to your entire workforce with AI personalization. Can you share some of the successes and challenges that you experienced in implementing something like that?
So, in addition to the broader future of work now, which was flexible working, redesigner work, the two other areas we pushed in a big way last year was this initiative around reskilling, upskilling at scale, and the idea of democratizing access to talent, which I'd love to talk to you about as well. But let's stick to the former, right? The crisis told us that was the best opportunity we saw last year of seeing innovation, empowerment at scale, right? So, suddenly we moved away due to necessity, a very, very rules-based culture, which is traditionally what companies like mine have been, to a principles-based culture. And we told our colleagues that these are the high-level principles, but we want you to do the best for your clients and colleagues. And our 86,000 colleagues, 14,000 people leaders rose to the challenge in an exceptional way, right? I mean, if you look at customer service stats, if you look at sort of business performance, if you look at sort of management or just regular operations, productivity, the scores have been phenomenally high. We spent quite a bit of time thinking about, so what is the insight? And the insight is that the days of us being prescriptive to people around, what they should learn, how should they do their job is going away. And a huge part of coming out of this crisis is empowerment, democratizing access, and hyper-personalization. So the work that we did around our learning agenda was based on these three insights. And in the middle of full lockdown, we migrated our traditional learning management system to a new AI-based learning management system. Like I said, it's a big change because the whole premise is the model works like LinkedIn. So depending on what you consume, which is based on the growth plan and that you set for yourself, content gets curated. The best of internal and external content gets curated for you and gets delivered to you bite-sized chunk. It was a big cultural shift. So, your line manager was not now nominating you for a program for which you had to book and take time out. You were able to consume learning in a way that suited you and not just stuff that made you better at the job that you are doing, but also give you an opportunity to reskill in areas of the bank where we knew that the demand for skills is going to be much greater in the future. And the take-up was phenomenal, Harpreet. I mean, it was absolutely phenomenal. We had, within months of the launch of our platform, which we call Discover, we had 75-80% of our workforce on the platform. The percentage of repeat users we have on the platform is among the highest. So, the underlying technology that we use is used by many large companies, and we monitor the data very, very closely. Not only are we getting people coming into the platform, we are seeing people who are staying on it much longer. So we drove that, but then very quickly we launched 10 future-focused academies. And this was a combination of both technical and human skills. So digital, data, sustainability, but also, inclusion, how to think about managing ambiguity, how to manage change. And we launched 10 future-focused academies via our Discover platform and had now curated learning pathways for colleagues to upskill themselves in areas if they are in these roles, but also reskill themselves, especially if they are in parts of the bank that are not touched as much by digital and data as other parts of the bank are. So it's been a great experiment.
So these learning platforms, they've come a long way, from the traditional LMSs to what we see now. But personalization is still not as good as it should be. So what are some of the things that you think that could be improved when it comes to such platforms?
It's great because I spent some time with my team, my Discover team today, to do our own retrospective on the launch. So, coming to just about a year of launching it, can we just sort of look back and do our own retrospective? And there were some really interesting insights that came from the team. When we launched it last year, the big focus was adoption. The huge focus on adoption, building a strong learning culture, moving learning from regulatory, mandatory, pushed from the center to pull, moving to future focus skills. And we drove adoption in a big way and we saw great success. But within a year of doing that, it's become very, very clear to us that the challenge with some of these platforms is just too much content, right? It's overwhelming, right? There is just so much stuff in there that colleagues are saying, I absolutely love it, but I'm just staggered and I'm just absolutely overwhelmed. And while it was a very conscious choice to drive adoption, we are very clearly and very quickly going to phase 2 of our piece of work, which is being very intentional in curating learning pathways and learning journeys that are actually from X to Y. So we are basically saying, this is our point of view on the kind of jobs where the demand is going to be much greater. How have we reached that conclusion? Because we've done a very detailed strategic workforce planning work. We know that these are going to be the jobs. We also know that these are the jobs where we are going to need lesser people going forward. And we have done a basic skills matching between jobs where we need less to jobs where we need more. And what we are now taking with the journey is writing to colleagues and inviting them to participate in a curating learning pathway with accreditations, with project-based sort of assignment, leveraging our talent marketplace, with a very clear outcome that this reskilling will translate into redeployment into future focus roles. Because that is where the commercial business case of all of this comes to life, right? When you are able to meet the demand that we have for data scientists, product managers, scrum masters, cybersecurity professionals, when you're able to meet at least some of the demand through internal deployment of talent, that is when the real commercial case around reskilling comes through. So I guess, my only observation from being part of the journey is technology is absolutely great, because for us to be able to do it at scale would have been impossible if we were working at the back of our old system. But just by plugging in really sexy technology does not mean that you are able to deliver a reskilling agenda into the organization. And there's a huge amount of work that needs to be done, both from an infrastructure, but also creating the right enablers to be able to get skills translating into actual employment.
You've talked about mapping job roles and skills, a lot of the work that you've done. So when you think about skills of the future for the financial industry specifically, what do those skills look like?
Some of them are obviously, that would be the same for any sector in any industry. We are talking about digital in a big way. We are talking about data in a very big way, in its broadest of sense. It's data analytics, gets into AI, but then sort of associated role, ethics, privacy, governance. Broad set of roles within data, broad set of roles within digital. We are talking about sustainability in a big way, sustainable finance, and what does that mean in terms of capability in relationship managers, but also risk professionals and other experts that you need. So we're talking about sustainability as a bucket. We're talking about new ways of working as a bucket on its own, because this idea of moving away from longer cycles to a shorter way of product development and bringing customer insights into it, it's by itself a big area of opportunity, I believe, in financial services. So that's the sort of area we are picking up. We are talking about future client, future consumer as a technical segment, because I think it's really important, especially for frontline, to understand how consumer preferences are changing. So that's all the technical skills. Like I said, we are also focusing on human skills as a specific academy. So we are within that. The idea of inclusive leadership is something we are talking about in a big way. managing ambiguity, managing ambiguity being a core competence of leaders going forward is a skill that we have picked up that we are going after in one of our academies as well.
You've talked about this idea of a marketplace that you've built, and very much reminds me of a lot of these gig marketplaces out there. So talk about what that initiative is and what was the impetus behind it.
I mean, the impetus was a very clear insight, and that's been the impetus for our whole reskilling agenda. And I think of the marketplace as a part of our overall reskilling agenda. The insight was, a fairly recent Deloitte research, which says 37 to 40% of employees surveyed find it easier to find a job externally than they find it to find a job internally. And that led to a huge amount of introspection in me and my team. And to say, how do we turn that on its head, right? How do we create an environment where matching of skills, so both demand and supply, can be done in a way. And again, I feel technology is our friend in that. AI is a real friend in being able to do some of that matching. The other thing is, a large percentage of our workforce are millennials. We did a piece of research, actually, classic EVP research, what attracts people to Standard Chartered, why do they stay there? We went into the research thinking that compensation, in a bank would be the number one reason. It was the number one reason in most markets, but career development and growth was very close second. And in many of our markets, parts of business, career development and growth was actually rated higher than compensation and reward. So this idea that if we can create an environment where people feel that there is a proactive matching of their skills to exciting opportunities, and we can link that to our reskilling agenda, it could be a really winning formula. And last year, we piloted our talent marketplace in India for 12,000 colleagues. And it's quite interesting, Harpreet, because when I spoke about it for the first time, and it's gig, so this is not more than 4 to 5 hours a week of your time. And a lot of people are, traditional colleagues or people who had been in banking for a long time said, oh, but are people going to get extra bonus for doing it? No. Are they going to get credits in their annual appraisal? No. Are you going to give them some kind of sort of recognition? No. Why are people going to do it? Well, people are going to do it because they are genuinely interested in their career development and growth. And actually, we know that the kind of people we employ are really excited about being part of exciting pieces of work and exciting projects. So we did it as a pilot. Unfortunately, we got into complete lockdown. But even with that, in a 6-month period in India, we had 2,600 opportunities on the platform. And at the end of the 6-month pilot, we had 4,000 hours of unlocked productivity, which we were able to give back into the organization, right? So we were able to say that because of these projects and, crowdsourcing data skills, crowdsourcing communication skills, crowdsourcing basic HR skills for pieces of work that were being done by product managers or pieces of work that were being in technology teams, we were able to show that it unlocked 4,000 hours of productivity. It was a fantastic insight because basically, if Tanuj is working on an exciting product for our cash management product for our customers, she really needs 3 weeks of data skills or needs a data scientist for 3 weeks for 4 hours a day. In the old world, she would have to fill out a job spec, go to her line manager, have conversations for a long time around budgets. We were able to circumvent all of that. And the feedback from both individuals who crowdsourced for skills, but also individuals who gave their skills for the project was incredibly impressive and very, very positive. So we've taken insights from that 6-month experiment and we are taking that top talent marketplace globally this year. So we are taking it across markets, but we are also linking it to big strategic pieces of work. So we are doing a lot of work around client journeys for our trade products, cash products, and we are linking marketplace to those innovative sort of journeys to be able to give our colleagues the opportunity to deploy their skills in very, very exciting areas.
That's a fascinating initiative. Have you found that there are certain functional areas that have more traction? Both in terms of who's posting the projects and who's performing the work. So that matchmaking becomes important. But where do you see the most traction?
Well, won't surprise you. The most traction is in technology and innovation areas, because those parts of the bank have been traditionally used to this way of working, and our initial traction was in those areas. But with any change like this, and it comes back to what are the core skills you need in HR, and I feel HR teams, the number one skill they need is strong data analytics within HR function. The other very strong skills that's needed is change management. So, we've had to put huge amount of change management effort. And what we have found is that while the lead was taken by our technology and ventures teams, we've got sort of ventures as a big part of our technology areas, the close second became a lot of pieces of work which are linked to our sustainability, pieces of work. So, a lot of stuff around designing sustainable solution for clients, thinking about our own sustainability agenda. So very quickly, it also started areas like that where there is a big demand, but not well-developed skills internally. And that sort of came as a close second. And won't surprise you that those are also the areas which people really want to be part of. If I'm a communications expert or a data scientist, or a cyber expert, I really would love to be able to give my time for a really exciting sustainability product that we are launching in Africa. So we've also found that those pieces of work or projects have got huge attention because people feel that they can link their own sense of purpose into something which is very exciting for our customers.
And Tanuj, are there any gatekeepers to this marketplace, or can anyone go and post a project and apply to a project?
Well, anyone who is part of the marketplace. So like I said, the first phase was largely India. We are taking it out, can put in a project, put in the hour, what they require from it. And I've got a small sort of SME team that sort of monitors it, coaches, corrects, because you do need it to be, we also keep track of who is using, how they are using it. So there is, a lot of this, as well as the future of work now we did, because when we went live with asking our people to apply for flexibility, a lot of people said to me, oh, have you been prescriptive that they can apply for flexibility as long as it's only 2 days a week or working from home? That takes away the whole idea of optionality, right? So to me, a huge part of this is that we want to have guardrails and principles, but it needs to be a platform that is owned by, run by, and used by our colleagues. And that's a huge part of the design for us.
So the CHRO is also a chief culture officer in many ways. So when you think of building culture in a company, it's a lot easier when you're within one geography. There's homogeneity in people, but when you operate across 60 markets, how do you do that job?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is really important. I mean, where that companies have a very clear North Star. I think it's really important that there is a very, very clear sense of what is the company's purpose and what are the expected standards of behaviors in the company. One of the first things I did when I joined Stanchart 4 years ago was a piece of work around refreshing our purpose statement and refreshing what we call, and we still call them, valued behaviors, because this idea of traditional values to me felt very generic. Most companies had very similar sounding values, and what we said was that we are going to clearly articulate our purpose, but then crowdsource our valued behaviors with all our colleagues, because valued behaviors are not the top 5 from a standard checklist of published values. These are the behaviors that are the guiding behaviors for all of us, irrespective of our cultural differences, depending on the part of the world that we come from. The piece on purpose has been really, really core to the HR agenda. This question that if Stanchart doesn't exist, what difference will it make to the world is a big question which has guided our thinking and has been a real sort of North Star that helps us be that cultural glue which holds everyone together. This week, I've just come at the back of a 3-day leadership team event we led for 420 of our senior-most leaders across 60 markets, fully virtually, of course. And a large part of that was not just focused on strategy, new ways of working, people and culture, innovation, but also we started off with what are the stands that we want to take in the world, stands which are aligned to our purpose and stands that will help us play our part in rebuilding a better world as we come out of the pandemic. And I think those conversations and creating space for that conversation is really, really important, because they become the unifying narrative across the organization, and then they cut across cultural, social differences that might exist between our markets.
Any parting words for our audience?
Well, I think this is such an exciting opportunity for the function, for leaders within HR. And personally, I'm just so excited by the legacy that we can leave behind in terms of building workplaces, thinking about work and workers in a way which is future focused, which is non-hierarchical, and which is a legacy that we can really, really be proud of. So, for me, I think it's a really exciting opportunity, and my strong encouragement to my team and other colleagues within the wider HR community to lean into this challenge and make the most of this opportunity.
Thank you, Tanuj. It's been such a pleasure.